What we see is that his moon is approaching the sun, so he is at the end of a major 29.5-year cycle. And the moment when the progressed moon will meet his sun is in 2026. Specifically, I believe it's at the beginning of 2026 and around March or April 2026. So in March or April 2026, there is a major life cycle change in Emmanuel Macron's chart. Well, it turns out that 2026 is also a very important date because you'll see what will happen in 2026. So now, let's put Emmanuel Macron's chart away in the closet together, if only it were that simple. And then let's take a look at these two charts together. Now don't worry, it looks complicated, but actually, we're just going to look at a few points together, something very simple within these two charts. I'm going to pick up the pen again. Let's make the lines a bit thicker. There we go. So in this chart here, this chart is the chart of 1789. And we're in July 1789, and here you have the chart for 2026. And here we are specifically looking at the summer season of the year 2026, precisely encompassing the months of July and August in 2026. So, with this in mind, what exactly do we discover and observe when we meticulously examine the historical chart from the year 1789? Since Pluto is a planet that takes 250 years to go around the zodiac, we're going to go back 250 years, and 250 years ago we find Pluto, which is currently in the sign of Aquarius. If we trace Pluto back, bring it back like this, 250 years earlier, we find it in 1789 here in the sign of Aquarius. Pluto, at that time, where I placed it in the summer of 1789, I picked that date at random. Maybe it reminds you of something, of course, from our school days, the French Revolution. So, in 1789, Pluto was in the sign of Aquarius here. So why is that? So it stays 20 years in this sign of Aquarius. Why did I choose 1789 specifically? Because of the French Revolution, but not only that. I chose the year 1789 because at that particular time there was also this significant opposition, a celestial alignment between the planets Pluto and Jupiter. You see here, Jupiter was at 17 degrees and Pluto was at 17 degrees. The very last time, just so you understand this quite clearly and precisely, the last time this specific configuration occurred was between the warm summer months and the early autumn period of 1789. Before that, never, you can look it up, there was never another time when there was this opposition of Pluto in the sign of Aquarius opposite Jupiter in the sign of Leo. It's the only time. In fact, it's the only time Pluto has been in the sign of Aquarius in the last 250 years. Just to show you how truly exceptional this is. So here, Pluto in the sign of Aquarius, Pluto therefore represents the second moment of the expression of Pluto in Aquarius, that is after the control we talked about. It's the phase of revolt, of taking things back into one's own hands, the people reclaiming their destiny, regaining power, and thus entering into revolution. The people rise up in revolution in 1789 against what? Against Jupiter in Leo. What is Jupiter in Leo? If you followed this video up to this point, you understand well that Jupiter in Leo represents the monarch. So it's the monarchy. So here we have a rebellion of the people against the Jupiterian monarchy with Jupiter in Leo. Leo, obviously the monarch, Macron, etc. So here you have the revolt against the monarchy. So that's what happened in 1789. A few short months, there you go. So, okay, I will come back to that particular point later on. Now, if we project ourselves into 2026, what will be in the sky? And once again, this is the sky for the whole world, for the entire planet. What are we going to find? We will find Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. It will be at 4 degrees Aquarius. And this Pluto in Aquarius will be opposed, exactly opposed to Jupiter in the sign of Leo. The last time this configuration occurred was in 1789. When will it happen again? In 2026. Now, we saw how things would gradually fall into place in Emmanuel Macron's chart to bring about a major change in 2026. Do you remember? the end of his progressed lunation cycle, the end of a cycle, the shift into a new cycle, so truly a significant milestone, with 2024 and especially 2025 being years that will have weakened his power, which will have, in any case, well, saying it will have weakened his power is a bit quick, but which will, at the very least, have led him to retreat into a form of authoritarianism. That is to say, when a tyrannical power is wavering, the more it wavers, the more it retreats into a form of authority. The more it tries to hold on to its power at all costs. So that's what we're going to witness. When I say a weakening, it's true that things are going to get harder and harder. But just like a wavering monarch at the end of his reign gradually retreats into his tower and can no longer really come out, he will harden his authority to hold on at all costs. But it's a fortress that's increasingly under siege. Well, in 2026, here we're going to see the same configuration as in 1789. So, in my considered view, here we clearly have a monarchic type of power, specifically Jupiter-Leo, which is directly opposed by a powerful resurgence of the common people and the inherent power of democracy. That is to say, the very people who rebel, who rise up with determination against this imposed authoritarian power. Here. So in 2026, theoretically, he will not yet be at the end of his term. Now, if this revolt is, in my opinion, it could be strong enough, I would say, to completely overthrow him. That is, to interrupt his second term before it ends. That is entirely possible. Entirely possible with this kind of configuration. If, however, that doesn't happen, honestly, the year 2026 and up until May 2027, since that would officially be the end of his term, is going to be really terrible. I think it would be France in flames and blood, caught between the last convulsions of a government trying to hold on at any cost and a people who, in any case, have nothing left to lose and only one option left, to revolt, even if it means bloodshed. It would need to be short, brief and intense so that there could really be a release at that moment. And then we move on to something else. We return to the foundations of our democracy, that is, power given to the people. Which is not the case today, you see. We talk a lot about Europe, but at no point do we talk about a referendum on Europe. The only referendum we had was already under Sarkozy, already a great globalist who didn't quite say so openly yet, but we were already in that mindset. And they explained to us that actually no. We had voted no to Europe, but we were told to revise our decision. And in fact, they weren't even going to ask our opinion again. And a year or two later, I think suddenly, there it was. They pushed the European treaty through, not through the front door, but through the window, and it went through. So already the construction of Europe is being done on a foundation that is absolutely not democratic. So at that point, I think there's a major revolution awaiting us during the year 2026, and more specifically in the summer of 2026. Will that be enough? What I think is that, if you will, what France and these revolts are lacking today, revolts that I truly support, because the farmers' cause is an eminently just one, as is that of healthcare workers. And in fact, it's the whole people, it's the entire cause of the French, of French citizens, which is just who simply aspire to be left to live their lives. To let them produce, to respect them in their identity, in their work, and above all, in their freedom. And all of that is being trampled on today. So, of course, I stand with all those who are rebelling today, because first of all, it comes from an awakening, and then they are fighting for their rights and for their freedom, in fact, for their dignity. So, of course, I support them. The problem is, as I explained, these are fragmented movements. They have been fragmented. So everyone is fighting for their own group, for their own identity group, I would say, or for their profession, whatever it may be. And that's not enough. If there is a coming together, a unification of struggles, then at that point, we're entering something else entirely. At that point, you can completely shut down a country and say, no, okay, we want to change things and so on. Even so, I don't think that's enough. Because here, we're still talking about a revolt that starts from the bottom and tries to blow the lid off, if you will, that's what it is. But then, what do we do instead? The problem today, and this is also the tactic of the plutocracy that governs us now, is that it doesn't want any philosophical alternatives to emerge, whether for the state of the world or simply for our own country, for the future of France. Above all, they don't want there to be a philosophical alternative, someone who comes forward to propose something different, another paradigm, compared to the one that is almost forced upon us, namely the globalist consumerist paradigm. So, of course, we absolutely need a coming together of various struggles to effectively break through the existing barrier, but there also needs to be somewhere, perhaps from someone else, another crucial spark, another viable alternative that is thoughtfully proposed, and that particular one must ultimately come from above. It's like glyphosate, which prevents grass from growing back, or aphids from attacking. I'm not sure, but it's the same idea, if you will. In fact, power today, it uses a kind of political glyphosate to prevent the emergence of another alternative. For example, Europe, the opening of markets, and so on. And even a philosophical vision. What do I want for France and for the French people? So it will also be necessary that in 2026, or maybe even before, I hope as early as 2025, some people or a person will step forward. Outside of the parties, since the parties themselves are corrupt today, all of them, they are more or less bought off. That someone stands up and says, actually, here I am offering another alternative, and this alternative, first of all, must be philosophical. Here is my vision for France. And here is what I want for you French citizens tomorrow. And so here, it's about bringing this administrative plutocracy, Saturn in Virgo, I stay within administration, I stay within administrative control, so-called solutions, etc., bringing Macron's Saturn in Virgo onto the philosophical field so that there can be a debate, so that there can be debates, so that there can be confrontations of ideas, and that these confrontations lead to the emergence of not just a single unique paradigm, but at least two different paradigms. One vision is globalist, international, consumerist, and then there's another vision based on true sovereignty and the freedom of peoples. And this second vision transcends all our current societal fragmentation. That is to say, even in the farmers' crisis today, we've still reached a point where the government, the governments, and those pulling the strings behind them have still managed to reach such a degree of fragmentation that even within the farmers' crisis, we find an opposition between agriculture and ecology, which is truly incredible, considering that these two things should, of course, go hand in hand. They are the two pillars of the same thing, agriculture and ecology, which is naturally ecological agriculture. So they should be united, and yet they've still managed to divide, even within this agricultural crisis, between environmentalists and farmers. It's really incredible that we've come to this point. So there needs to be this vision that comes from above, this person, a person who emerges, who has legitimacy and brings moral legitimacy to France, perhaps someone whose name resonates with the French people and who transcends the divisions of these parties, who brings together all these fragmented segments of the French population through a vision, I would say a real vision, a philosophical vision for France. So at that point, there could be a revolt. This is Pluto in Aquarius making the pot boil from underneath to blow off the lid. That's true. But there also needs to be support for a truly new ideal, a compelling vision, a significant project for France, and a project embodied by a singular person who genuinely transcends political parties and indeed small groups. Interest groups in France today. But of course the government doesn't want that. It wants to keep fragmenting society and fragment it even more. So if we have both, and I think we absolutely can have both in 2026, that is a people's revolt and at the same time a new ideal, an allegiance to someone else, a figure who comes to embody this new vision for France, then at that point we can truly shift into something different. And open a new path based more on humanity than on the control of commerce and consumerism, because we are no longer citizens. Today, above all, we are consumers. We really need to be aware of that. That's what I wanted to show you in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If that's the case, don't hesitate to click the little thumbs up and also to share this video. It's an act of resistance to do so, to spread a perspective that isn't necessarily shared by the media in our society, a view of the state of the world through astrology. You also know that I offer an online course, which is now complete and fully developed. It's available on my website, monsigneastrologique.fr. You'll also find a new type of consultation, which I've been offering for years. I conduct in-depth consultations on professional orientation charts. Since the end of last year, I've also been offering other consultations called Answer to a Specific Question. Here you have a list of questions. You can check if the question or concern you currently have is on this list, and if it is, don't hesitate. Choose this consultation and I will reply to you in writing within 7 days after thoroughly analyzing your transits beforehand. There you go. Finally, there's the online shop with card decks and new books. There are new astrology books that have just arrived. So, new arrivals. Take a look. There are things that might interest you in the field of astrology, but also in personal development. That's it. I'm done. Thank you again for your attention. And I'll see you again in a little while, in a few weeks, for the next videos on astrosciences. Thank you very much. See you soon. Goodbye.